Hello, chapter 5, part number 2. So we're going to go over some of the arguments in favor of free will. First of all, um, notice that personal freedom is not found in objects, it is found in subject. That is, what makes people free is not choosing between A, B, C, D in the first place. What makes people free is knowing what they're choosing. So as long as you know you're conscious of the choices in front of you, then you have some freedom. This also means that human beings can never be completely free because we're limited in knowledge and wisdom. We don't know all the consequences of what we do, and the context that surrounds our choices sometimes we don't know. But again, as long as you're conscious, you know exactly what you're choosing, you have some freedom. Number two, determinism is actually largely true. uh, it is the conclusion that is false. Let's say you are flying into California, for example. So it's guaranteed, it is determined the plane will land in California. But notice what happens inside the plane, though, what you do in the plane is up to you. Whether you simply sit in the plane, watch some TV, use the bathroom, talk to somebody, those things are not determined the same way the plane is determined to go to California. So, likewise, even though nature is largely determined, but what we do with nature, what we do every day, often is our free choices. Number three, some people think, you, one way to make sense of it is to think about a video game. Uh, if you play video games, you know there are certain things you cannot do in the game. It all depends on how the designers design the game itself. Um, but you're probably free to kick or to run or to shoot somebody. Or to, it all depends on how the designers of the game design the game. So certain moves can never be done. Likewise, human being, well, there are things we cannot do. We cannot fly. I cannot make myself 6 feet tall if I'm not 6 feet tall. But there are other things within the world that I am free. I can do them. Number four, determinism is actually self defeating. That is, if you believe it, it is because you were determined by nature to believe it. If you don't believe it, it's because you were determined by nature not to believe it. So you can't really choose to believe or not believe in this idea, see, because again, there's no free will. It's not up to you what your beliefs are. So to some extent, this means it would be true if you believe it, but that's not your fault. And also it's false if you don't believe it, but again, that's not your fault. You see, both can be true. Number four, notice the human mind thinks in terms of two: top, bottom, left, right, front and back, good and evil, and so forth. If the way our minds are built, we think in terms of two, dualism pretty much. Notice then, if determinism is true, then there has to be freedom as well, right? In fact, we wouldn't know what determinism is unless we believe in free will at the same time. So left means back, good means bad, top means bottom, front means back. And freedom must also means there must be some freedom somewhere. Number five, some people believe, well, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French guy, He thought it was impossible to be self conscious and not have some freedom. It is impossible to be self conscious and not be free at the same time. Why? Let's say I have a big problem that I'm facing with, and I think about it, I reflected about it for 7 hours or 7 days. And after 7 hours and 7 days, I finally make a choice. But notice if determinism is true, it doesn't matter how many hours, how many days I spend thinking about this problem. Whatever choice I made, whatever choice I will make was already determined. You see, this means self-consciousness, self-reflection would be pointless. It doesn't mean anything because the choice has already been made. Evolution would not have chosen these characteristics. It wouldn't last long if self-consciousness, self-reflection was useless. So the fact that we are self-conscious, we can deliberate, we can reflect, self-reflect, think, all of it would be pointless. It would not have any survival value if we don't have any actual freedom. Number six, this is the big one, moral responsibility. You can only be held accountable for something only if you could have done differently. You can only be held accountable for something only if you could have done differently. So determinism conflicts with moral responsibility. The justice system is based on one big giant assumption. Human beings have free will. We have discipline. We can control what we do. We can. If determinism is true, then there can't be any personal, moral, legal responsibility. Because whatever you do it because you are programmed by nature to do it. If I rob a bank after this lecture today, it's because, well, in my past, my genetics, my family are bringing something in nature. Since the creation of the world, it was determined that today after this lecture, I was gonna rob a bank. You see, it doesn't make much sense. This also means, well, this is why lawyers sometimes use this argument to help people get away with crime. I mentioned a case called the Twinkies defense case about a man in San Francisco was eating Twinkies, junk food. A few days after that, he went to City Hall, shot and killed the mayor. The lawyer argued he shot and killed the mayor because of junk food he was eating a few days prior. The junk food caused a chemical imbalance in his brain. He wasn't really himself. Therefore, we should have compassion, pity on people like this. It was a case in Chicago, 1920. Two teenagers, they wanted to commit the perfect crime. They kidnapped a boy, they killed the boy, dismembered him, buried him. When they caught them, the prosecutor demanded the death penalty. The lawyer argued, using this idea, yes, they did it, but it's not their fault. The lawyer said, nature is like a play. The script is already written. When you are born, they throw you into this play. It's not really up to you. Therefore, we should have compassion, pity. The justice system should not give them the full sentence that they deserve. See? So not only you cannot blame people for anything that they do, you can't clap your hands for them either. You cannot applaud them. You cannot praise them for good behavior. If I cure cancer, if I pass all my classes with A's, who gets the credit? Well, if there's no freedom, if there's no free will, then it means I get no credit. It all happens. It's just nature flowing through me. Really? You see the problem. So again, If somebody, let's say, was born with cancer or blindness, you can't blame them for that. It's not a choice. If somebody was born with blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes, you can't blame them for this because that's not a choice. Likewise, if I pass all my classes with A's, if I cure cancer, if I build a first time machine, really, I get no credit because there's no free will. So, if all this is true, then the legal justice system, we need to replace it with mental health institutions. When somebody commits a crime, you send them to the psychiatrist to see if they could pretty much reprogram them. But it doesn't make sense to hold anyone accountable, but also to praise them for good behavior. So again, this is clearly in conflicts with the fact that we believe we have moral duties and responsibilities. Okay. Compatibilism, that's another theory for free will. It says that yes, determinism is true, but we can still have free will. In fact, we do have free will. For you to have free will, your actions need to be caused by your own mental states, by your own psychological states. Okay? If your actions are not constrained externally, and if you're in control of your own psychology, then you have free will. Let me unpack this. If you're working at the bank, somebody pulls a gun on you and asks you for money, and you give the money to the person, that's not free will, because the gun forces you, constrains you to give the money. If somebody hypnotizes me, and then the person implants ideas in my mind, and I go and commit a crime because of those ideas implanted in my mind by that person, I'm not acting freely. If, let's say, somebody inserts a microchip inside my brain and the person downloads memories, ideas, desires into my mind, and then I commit a crime, I do something good based on those ideas, desires that the person downloads into my mind, I'm not acting freely because the ideas, the desires are not mine. So what compatibilism says, compatibilism is that if you're not externally constrained, nobody's forcing you, pushing you, and if your action is the result of your own psychology, your own mind, your own desire, your own mental states, then in that case you are acting freely. Okay. Another idea is called libertarianism. This basically says that yes, again, determinism is true, largely true, but human beings, our actions are free because we are persons, not things. We are person, not objects. The flowers, the rivers, the moon, the trees, probably they're not free. If the moon is falling from the sky, the moon can say, well, let me stop doing that. The sun can't say, well, I've been rising for too long, almost every day, so I have to take a break this morning. The sun can't do that because again, they're not free. But notice human beings, we are living things, we are self-conscious things, entities. So libertarianism says, well, you can't really compare a human being to an apple, to a tree, or a river, or a moon, or a sun, because we're alive. We have thoughts and memories. We remember our past. For nature, it's like a domino falling, yes. Once the first domino falls, everything else will simply fall. But it's not true of human beings, even though the chain of causation, dominoes falling, is just going one way, one way, one way, one way. Human beings, because we are self-conscious, we have thoughts and memories, we are persons, rational, then we remember the past. Because of that, we can actually create a new branch of causes and effects. Again, for nature is simply causation. Agents is simply straight, blind causation, causation, causation. But for human beings, again, it's agent causation. Because again, we are persons and we are self-conscious, we have thoughts, and based on that, we can change things. Lastly, there's an idea called psychological behaviorism. It says that our behavior is a result of training. Psychologists, Skinner, B.F. Skinner back then, argue for this. So the same way you could train animals, Pavlov training a dog to salivate at the sound of a bell. So they thought you could do the same thing to human beings, but eventually they realized, well, we're way too complex. There's no way you can do that. So to summarize arguments for free will, first of all, it's not just in choosing, it's knowing what you choose, what you're choosing. Number two, even though nature is determined, like a plane going to California, but what you do in the plane is up to you. Number three, you can think of it like a video game again. The design of the game depends on the designer. The way you could play the game, the moves you make in the game depends on the way the game is built. But what moves you make in the game, that's up to you. Number three, self-consciousness. If you're self-conscious, you can engage in self-reflection. You have to also have some freedom. If not, self-consciousness, self-reflection, deliberation would not have any survival value. Number four, human beings thinks in terms of two, left and right, good and evil, top, bottom, front and back. Likewise, if there's unfreedom, there must be some freedom as well. Number five, determinism conflicts with moral responsibility. You can only be held accountable for a behavior if only you could have done differently. And libertarianism says, well, we are persons, not objects, not things, and we can create a new branch of causes and effects. And number six, compatibilism says, well, yes, determinism is true, but we can also act freely, because if your actions are not constrained externally, and if they come from your own psychology, your own mind, your own mental states, your own desires, again, not constrained externally, then you can act freely. All right. So this is it for this video, and the next one I'm going to discuss sociobiology, which is the theory that human beings, our behavior is a result of genetics and natural selection, theory of evolution by natural selection. Thank you for watching.